Welcome to Brandstorm, the podcast that talks to the people behind America's brands. I'm Dan Trzynski, president of Platypus Advertising and Design.
And I'm Nancy Christopher, PR director at Platypus. Our guest today works with companies to develop high-potential managers. Please welcome Nathan Bars, Manager of Executive Programs at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee's Sheldon B. Lubar School of Business. Thanks for joining us, Nathan.
I'm glad to be here.
You know, for some people, learning never ends. Tell us about your executive program at UWM. This is not like someone who's going to college or people going back for their MBA, right?
Correct. It's very different. So the executive programs is really about working with professionals in their field right now and helping them become better at being whatever they do. So it's really about working with the business community, working with those high potential leaders that they identify, and then helping them understand how to build that capacity, how to really get them over the hump, whether it's going from manager to director to vice president. It's really talking through those specific competencies, those behaviors that are shown to be successful at those levels, and then helping them reach their goals. So the business gets something out of it, the individual grows and develops out of it as well, and hopefully when we do our jobs right, the whole business community, Milwaukee, gets better.
How did the collaboration between companies and the university come about? I mean, what comes first, right?
Right, chicken or the egg, right? And I think it's in response really to the business community. So about 17 years ago, the chancellor now, Mark Money, was actually in our department. And he, in response to the business community, worked with 6 different organizations, all sending 6 individuals to what we call the Strategic Leadership Series program. And that was kind of the first iteration of how we were responding to the business community and providing this training and education for them. Over the years, that program is still going. It happens every single spring. And it's something that we hold on to. From that strategic leadership series, we realized that there was a niche that needs to be filled. And there's a lot of other organizations that do the kind of work that we do with leadership and development and those types of things. But we expanded into what we call the custom programming space. So for example, we worked with a business organization recently who was shopping around for this executive education programming. They have a very set, specific 6 competencies that they were looking to fill. And they said they couldn't find that in any of the kind of off-the-shelf programs. Well, we kind of looked with them and said, well, we can hit all 6 of those because we're able to listen to you, respond to your needs, and then develop the correct curriculum to be able to hit all 6. So it's a long process, but remember, and we're right at the beginning of that right now. So we went from this kind of structured program and strategic leadership series to the ability to really interact with the business community in a really fluid way to be able to help meet their needs.
I got to follow up to that.
Yeah.
Is there a cost to the company to develop a specific program like that, or is that reflected in what it costs on a per student basis?
In a custom program, it's not necessarily per student. You know, we work with organizations as small as maybe a group of 15, but then, developing the program, you have to kind of pass that on. But when we get up to 30 or 35 people, it's actually more cost effective to do a custom program than it is to maybe send somebody to a strategic leadership series. We're a public institution. I wish we could charge exorbitant amounts of money to do what we do, but the truth is we don't. We do a lot of that legwork with and for companies that really as a partnership. If you come to us and say, hey, we're having challenges retaining employees. We're having challenges with engagement. They want to see more productivity. I was thinking, on the way over here, everybody says more with less. Well, but that's not really the case. It's really more with more. We want to provide that second more, which is the understanding of how to do more. It's a long process, but we build out kind of the basic core components of the curriculum pretty much as a way to build that relationship. We don't want to just say, here's something off the shelf. And so we really invest a lot of time and money up front, knowing that we're going to get the contract at the end of the day. So it's not necessarily that it would cost somebody up front to come and talk with us. We have a lot of ideas about how to do. We've been doing this for quite a while.
When do they get the bill?
They get the bill at the end.
At the end of the lessons?
Yes.
Or after people have taken the course?
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, there's a contract in place. There's certain guarantees. We're not going to be left out there.
Right.
But we're not going to charge somebody for having the conversations to develop what the curriculum would look like.
Okay.
We would sign the contract after we both agree. We're not looking...
that this is what we're going to develop. Yeah. Here's how many lessons it's going to take. Here's the length of the program.
Exactly.
And then this is what the fees are going to be.
And if you put 15 people through that program, cost per person is going to go up.
Right.
If you have 35 to 40 people,
cost goes down. It's fixed. It's not the number per student.
Correct.
I imagine with the custom programs that Obviously, the students come from the companies themselves, but
Correct.
with your leadership series and stuff, where did those students come from? Are they typically manager hopefuls, middle management, higher level of expertise?
Yeah, so realistically in that program, that strategic leadership series program, we look to our sweet spot, like we like to say, is the senior manager or director level. You can get some vice presidents, depending on the size and level of the organization. You know, titles are kind of vary depending on the size and the complexity of somebody's organizational structure. But a lot of the times, it is those senior level managers or director level. And as far as the businesses that participate within it, it's quasi-cohort structure. So we like to see 6 to 8 people from each of the organizations across functional roles to be able to really dive deep into some of those programs and things like that are happening within the organization to help them have personal projects to drive kind of a return on investment for the business. So it's really about, you know, that cohort kind of structure. And that's kind of my role, is I get to go out and I talk with people about what the program is and what a difference it's made in other organizations here in Milwaukee.
So how is an individual curriculum developed? Is that something that the business takes as much of a role, saying this is the specific training that I'm going to need, so I'm going to do a brain dump with you and say, here's what I need everybody to know, and this is what I want, how I want them to behave after the fact, and then you come up with the tools, the tactics, that to make that happen? Or is it just saying, this is the outcome that I want, you figure it out?
It doesn't work so well that way. The brain dump is really the preferred method, which sounds horrible, but that's really it. I know it's kind of like a buzzword to say, we want to be your partners, but in this case, it's almost required. We need to get intimately involved with the business to be able to better understand what their expectations are and how those perceptions of what they decide as their competencies or their management criteria, whatever that looks like to them, it's going to be different in how it plays out within their organizational structure on a regular basis. So what kind of models they already use within their business, whether it's like a communication tool like DISC, or if it's this type of feedback, or if it's this type of change management tool. We need to know what those are so we can teach to them. For instance, we worked with an organization recently, and the kind of the structure of the program we did a level setting, which was about an hour and a half worth of conversation about what is a balance sheet, what do the pluses and minuses mean, and how does it look like in general. But then we actually worked with the CFO of the organization to come in and talk about to that organization's balance sheet to be able to make it more impactful. It's not just information, but it's a transfer of knowledge that we're really looking for. And so that kind of...
What do the numbers mean?
Yeah. And that relationship, that brain dump to be able to work within the upper level of the organization to really drive that engagement and to be able to say, we see the upper level of the organization really believing in what we're doing, and that really drives the engagement down the pipeline.
I think there's a lot of businesses that, you know, they can say, this is the outcome that I want, but I'm not necessarily sure how to teach people that. So that's where you come in. And
we can work as an advisor for that type of situation. So maybe some smaller organizations. There's a lot of family-run businesses in southeast Wisconsin, and maybe going in for them and helping them understand, what does succession planning mean? There's something along the lines of like 24% of the workforce population with all that industrial knowledge, it's going to retire within the next 5 to 10 years. So how do you... These are businesses that have never thought about succession planning. How do you get this all down on paper? How do you hire for those roles? How do you identify the quote-unquote millennial that's going to take over down the road and maintain that family-run culture and business atmosphere? And so we've got some information on that. We might not be the right thing for everybody, but we do have this great mix of faculty that's that research-driven UWM Milwaukee faculty. And then we also work with boots on the ground, lived experience executives that come in and help be our adjunct faculty to really, again, drive that part of the program. And we can do that. We can be the expert on those types of things. Again, we're not going to be the right thing for everybody, but just the conversation doesn't hurt with us to be able to say, and we might be able to push that person to the right resource.
You talked a little bit about how you determine what organizations need, but how is that measured? How are the outcomes measured?
Very, very carefully. It's really hard, and that's something that I think that the entire industry is kind of challenged with, is really understanding how do you measure a behavior change. As an outside vendor, sometimes it's difficult But that's, again, where that relationship focus really helps us understand what we're doing and how it's impacting the business. So I mentioned the strategic leadership series, and we work with them on a personal project. So a lot of that is working with them to identify upfront what is their personal goal. We can then say, yes, you met this or didn't. And then the customized programs, we're able to go in and do kind of the same thing. What do you want to see as a behavior change? We're working right now to develop really a tool, like a level 3 survey, to be able to go back a year after the program or 3 years after the program and be able to, whether it's surveying the coworkers, whether it's being able to see whether somebody got promoted, those types of things that we see as metrics for being able to say the program did or did not work.
Can you give us an example where you've been really proud of what's been able to happen? No?
Yeah.
Cut that.
One thing that stands out in my mind, so we just wrapped up the strategic leadership series for this year a few weeks ago, and there's a woman in the course who came in and she said she had a chip on her shoulders. She didn't want to be there. She was about 3 or 4 years out from retirement. And she had actually told her manager, I don't want to be in this class. You should invest this time on somebody else. At the end of the class, she came back and she said, I'm putting off retirement. I didn't think this would happen, but I am so reinvested in myself and my business that I'm going to stay on for a couple more years.
Wow, that's pretty good.
So I was talking about that kind of that cohort structure to the leadership program, and there were people in the room from Canada, Australia, the United States, and Italy. And they realized that their personal projects, some were in supply chain, some of them were in finance, but they realized that the starting of one project and the end of the other were overlapping. And so through the conversation, they broke down those kind of functional silos and had real conversations with the people on the other end of the phone that is hopefully going to drive that project forward. That was only a month and a half ago, but I'm hoping that those types of relationship building can really make an impact on them personally and professionally.
In terms of what you teach, is it about leadership? Is it about sales, marketing, supply chain management, or is it even looked at that way?
Yeah, it's about working on the business instead of in the business. So how do you really, as a leader, be able to pull the strings and know what's going on and be able to continue with your strategic thought and developing the people underneath you? So things like being a highly emotionally intelligent leader will be one. How do you develop a highly effective team? Leadership versus management. What are the differentiations there? Negotiations, networking, presentations. You don't really get taught those things when you are...
That's more soft skills than this is how you move package A to B to C.
Right. It's those skills that really, I think, differentiate the manager versus the leader. Being a servant leader is something that we find a lot of organizations talk about and look to.
That makes sense. So looking at the future, we have companies like Foxconn, Uline, Amazon. They're going to be bringing in thousands of jobs. In your opinion, do we have enough talent here in the area to fill those jobs?
I hope so. I think the university as a whole has a big part to play as a part of Milwaukee as a whole. I think that the role that we can play working with the Foxconns, the Ulines, Generac, I just read, is creating 300 more jobs.
Right.
Oshkosh Truck. I mean, that's not that far away, but we have a huge population here. And I think that we can play the role of developing that talent for people. There was a study that came out a little while back that out of those 3,000 jobs, and granted this is a very small sample size of 19 years and younger, out of those 3,000 jobs, less than 100 people would be qualified right now to be able to take one of those jobs. I think that the university needs to be a part of that conversation, but I think it's a larger conversation as a whole with both, again, a partnership between the business community, helping us understand what's going to make somebody successful within their business, and then identifying maybe which institution would be best to help. Is that a conversation we should be having in 8th grade, high school? Is it something we should be looking at as a tech school, a 2-year degree? Would that be good? So you're coming out with the skills that are required to get a great paying job, to live and stay and help Milwaukee grow and thrive.
Well, I did hear Governor Walker last week mentioning that the universities, the technical colleges, had really stepped up in this whole process of bringing
to reskill
jobs to the
people,
area.
because
Right.
in reality, companies need to fill positions right now.
Right.
I can't wait for somebody to go, through a 4-year program or something like that. So I think programs like you're talking about today are awesome, where it's like, oh, look, I can, how long are your typical custom programs? Are they 6 weeks, 8 weeks, a month?
Well, for ours, they're 6 to 8 days.
Okay, wow.
That's kind of the longest that we would do.
In a row or over
a series of time. So the biggest one, that Strategic Leadership Series, that's an 8-day program over 4 months.
Okay.
With the goal being that as you go through a 3-day session, you have time in between to apply the information that you're gaining.
I think that's important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that a lot.
Otherwise, it's you drink through the fire hose, and 2 weeks after you've been through it's like I don't remember anything.
You have a brain dump.
You're right.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's where the Foxconn jobs and those different types of things, we have to look at more. Like, again, the university as a whole, the education system as a whole. UWM is working with Foxconn on an internship program where they're sending 5 individuals actually over to the Foxconn headquarters where they're going to work for a year to be able to understand the business, the culture, and then come back and work within the business. So those
that's
types
excellent to hear.
Yeah, those relationships are happening. What we really need to do is really open up those lines of communication between the research institutions like UWM and those businesses that are looking for help. I think that too long we've had a divide in between, and we can break that down because we're both focused on the same goal, which is creating people that are going to be successful in the life that they choose. And whether that's working in Foxconn, Uline, Badger Meter, any of those other wonderful organizations and businesses that live and grow within Milwaukee County, we've got the same goals. We just need to talk.
So if you're a business, regardless of where you are, so let's Tulsa, Oklahoma, so I'm not going to come to UWM for a program like this. Who at my local university or tech school or something like that, how does that process work? How do I raise my hand and say,
in Tulsa, Oklahoma?
Can you help me?
Yeah. Call Steve. It's
right.
No, I'm just kidding. I think that the biggest thing right now is with this question, I was trying to figure out what would an answer be for this, but I think it's really just starting the conversation. If it were UWM, for instance,
right.
Go on the website, uwm.edu. There's a big spyglass in the corner, like your Sherlock Holmes. Type in whatever you're looking for, and just pick up the phone and call that part of the university.
So what's it called? Continuing education, or what's the name of the typical department that I'm going to be looking for?
I would say executive education would be one of them.
Okay.
The continuing education is a slightly different program. It's funny you chose those words, but that's more of like a degree and certificate program that UWM also offers. But I would say call any number that's listed on that website, and they will be ecstatic to hear from you and understand, and they will be able to direct you where to go.
But are most universities, are you seeing around the country, doing these types of things?
I guess I can't say most, but there are several. I think that we maybe are more of an early adopter.
Okay.
But the big names like Harvard Business School, the other kind of large schools that are known for their business programs are in this space, like Booth School. There's a lot out there. And there's a lot that are going to give you different types of programs. Like I mentioned earlier about the company that was searching for those 6 competencies they were looking for. A lot of what these other organizations are able to provide are more kind of in-the-box trainings.
So cookie-cutter program.
Exactly. So you might sign up for one program, and you'll get what you pay for, but whether or not you're going to be able to experience that ROI or understand, it's more than just watching a video online or turning in an assessment at the end of it. It's really about what we have, I think, that I haven't seen elsewhere, is those simulations, the ability to practice what you're learning, as well as to focus on that customized approach to be able to say, what's your project, how are you going to get better, and how are you going to implement what you're learning? How are we going to change behavior to make this worthwhile?
Are any of these programs that you're doing offered like completely online?
They're not right now.
No.
And I think for that very reason, you lose that engagement and the person-to-person contact, which is really where the learning happens. So we use what we call the executive MBA kind of style of learning. That's kind of, again, where this program kind of came out of, is understanding that these core kind of competencies that businesses are looking for is what we're teaching in our executive MBA program. And so we kind of made these mini modules out of it where you can, again, work on yourself and on your business versus being in it. And so taking it out of the classroom and missing out on that interaction with the other people in the room, it would kind of deflate the program a little bit, I think.
I understand.
Trust me, we thought about it because I think we could really make a killing on it.
Well, then you could help the people in Tulsa that can't.
Yeah, we could. Hi, Tulsa. Call me. But in the long run, I was sitting, again, in one of our trainings, and the CEO was in the room. He said, took 2 things away from him. He said, be selfish with your time. Forget your phones buzzing. Forget all that. You're here to learn and work on yourself. And it's just super impactful and something that we like to make sure people understand when they're working with us. This is your time. Be selfish with it. But the second piece that he said was only 50% is going to come from the person standing in front of this room. The other 50% of what you're going to learn is from the interactions you're going to have with your coworkers, the interactions you're going to have with each other, talking about how has somebody else in real life used their practical understanding of this topic to address a real situation. And that's really where the learning happens. We don't call them instructors, we call them facilitators for a reason, because they're there to facilitate a conversation. They're there to help guide that conversation, but they're never going to be able to say, you're going to do it and you're going to do it this way.
This is how you're going to do it, right.
Yeah. And I think that the online component, although it's great for some base level understanding and knowledge or information, it's really hard to get the knowledge and the impact and the understanding of how impactful it can be without sitting across a table from somebody.
Dan, luckily in this area we have Nate, so we don't have to
right.
go to all these.
Don't have to worry about it.
What's the best way to connect with you?
I think the best way is njbars, B-A-R-E-S, at uwm.edu. I love emails. I love talking with people, obviously, and figuring out how we can help them be better.
Well, that's great. Best of luck to you. I think this is an awesome thing for you because there is a skills gap out there. I mean, it's the number one thing in talking to businesses on a daily basis that I hear is, we've had job openings and we can't find people that are just the right fit.
Right.
Because the world, jobs are changing. I've had this conversation with other educators too. Is it's like, when you look at even our business with Google and Facebook and the evolutions, there's no way a 4-year program can keep up with as fast pace of change that the actual skills are needed because, it'll change twice in 6 months. By the time you write a curriculum, it's already changed.
Right.
I also like the fact that, you would think that only big companies could take advantage of something like this, but you said the mom and pops. Any business, if they saw that skills gap or whatever, can come and get some help.
Yeah, we can do our best. And then, like I said, we don't want to be everything to everybody. But
right.
we want to be able to be the resource to understand how to help. And so even if I'm not the answer, I'm never going to be so proud to say, you have to take this. It's about helping.
Right. And maybe you can point them to
Absolutely.
something that isn't off the shelf or something that might be a great fit. So I think it's great that any business can just pick up the phone and give you a call. That's an awesome resource to have, and thank the university for that.
Thanks, Nathan.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right, and if you like what you've heard, please don't forget to share, review, and subscribe to Brandstorm.
This is Dan Trzynski along with Nancy Christopher at Platypus Advertising and Design, an awesome company that creates perceptions that influence choice for a variety of regional, national, and even global brands on a daily basis. We hope you'll join us next week for another episode of Brandstorm.